Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of Ecto. My name is Michelle Auger. Tonight I have two stories for you. One is mine, and then another one I'll be reading like it's mine, but this one's not. It was actually from one of my friends, and she had sent it to me, and it's really good. She also works in healthcare, and it was a story from her working at the hospital. So, give me just a few minutes here, and I'm gonna play a commercial for you from our own ideas, and I'll be back in just a few minutes. Thanks.
KBLP LLC. Check us out on iHeart, Speaker, YouTube, iTunes, Spotify, with the best podcasters in the business. Denise Harris, Chris Stevens, Michelle Auger, Ike Diaz, Desiree Pickett, Anissa Nicole, Cecilia Flores, Lolita Diaz. Sponsored by TBs303.com. We are also looking for new podcasters. Inbox any of our podcasters or me, Ike Diaz, directly on Facebook, and someone will get back with you ASAP. KBLP LLC. Check us out on iHeart, Speaker, YouTube, iTunes, Spotify, with the best podcasters in the business. Denise Harris, Chris Stevens, Michelle Auger, Ike Diaz, Desiree Pickett, Anissa Nicole, Cecilia Flores, Lolita Diaz. Sponsored by TBs303.com. We are also looking for new podcasters. Inbox any of our podcasters or me, Ike Diaz, directly on Facebook, and someone will get back with you ASAP.
Okay guys, welcome back. This first story, I'm going to call it Warning from Beyond, because that is pretty much exactly what happened to me. I guess it starts when I was little. I lost my mom's mom, my grandma, when I was almost 8 years old. Even though we lived apart from her at the time, I used to spend a lot of time with her when I was little. And one of the things that I do remember about her, she was kind of, I guess you could say, odd. She kind of knew things, do you know what I mean? Like, she could walk into a place and she could tell you, like, people who lived there and things like that. And it was just kind of, it was really interesting. I mean, the only way I could describe her is, I don't know if any of you have ever watched the Dead Files, but she kind of reminded me of Amy Allen a little bit, because that's how she was. And she always knew, like, things. She knew when people were lying to her. She just she really was an amazing person. But like I said, we had moved away from her when I was probably around 4 or 5, and then my mom had gotten a call, which was really strange too, because my mom had a letter in her purse that she was going to mail off to her. So at the time there wasn't email or anything like that. And my mom was going to mail this letter off to her, and she procrastinated. And that very morning, I can remember my mom telling me, remind me to mail this off today. I have to get this off today. And then she got the call that afternoon that her mother had passed away. And anyways, we had gone back to Illinois for the funeral and all that. And the littler kids, we all had to stay with, like, relatives and stuff. And you know how that goes when there's funerals and whatnot. And I remember when we had gone to the church, and I can remember people being sad. And I mean, and I understood death to a certain extent, but at that age I really wasn't. Do you know what I mean? You don't really. I actually seen her standing at the church, and of course nobody believed me. They thought I was in distress or whatever. And we just never spoke of it again. Well, years had gone by, and I never had seen her spirit. You know what I mean? Like, never. My mom always had a picture of her on the wall, but it was when my grandma was younger. And I remember seeing the picture every day, but I couldn't for the life of me remember what my grandma looked like when I was little, which is really strange, but I couldn't. Like, I couldn't picture her face. All I could see was this picture on the wall. Well, when I was a teenager, I was just about, no, I think I was 16, sorry. I started my first job, and my first job, it was Taco Bell, back when they had, like, the old polyester hats and all. I don't know if you guys remember those, but it was a trip. Anyways, I was working a lot of hours, because back then there were no labor laws that said your kid could work so many hours, you could just work them like dogs, so I did a lot of hours. Like after school, I would go in and I would stay, and I don't know why I felt like I needed to please these people. Anyways, it was just getting to the point of I was exhausted. And there was one night I had gone to bed and I woke up and I remember hearing something out in the kitchen. So I thought I was awake anyways, and I went out in the kitchen, I got myself something to drink, and I sat on the kitchen table. And I remember somebody walking in the living room, because you could see the living room, from the kitchen, and it was a woman. And I'm like, hello? And I looked, she turned, and her face was like illuminated, and it was the face of my grandmother's picture. And I just kept staring. I didn't know what to say. Now, my grandmother had a very sharp tongue. That much I remember. She's like, what are you staring for? What's wrong with you, child? Speak to me. Tell me what's going on, and just things like that. And she comes over and she sits down at the table. And she's like staring at me. But like I said, her face is illuminated. And it's the picture on the wall. But I don't know. It's just really strange. And she starts asking me, like kind of chit-chat questions. How are you, And I'm like, Grandma, how are you here? How are you here? And she's like, don't ask questions, child. Just, I need you to do something for me. So I sat there and kind of stared at her for a minute. And she's like, answer me, child. I want you to do something for me. I'm like, oh, okay, Grandma, what do you want me to do? So I'm thinking like some kind of crazy thing, bringing her back from the dead. Who knows, You're a teenager, your mind goes to those places. And she tells me, she says, and she told me in a few weeks, she said, in a few weeks, somebody's going to come to you with a red truck. She said, do not get in that truck. I said, but what do you mean, Grandma? I don't know anybody with a red truck. She's like, child, do not interrupt me when I'm speaking to you. She says, I need you to listen. I said, okay, Grandma. So she tells me about this red truck, and she says, if you get in this truck and you get in this truck with those people, you are going to die. And she said, others are going to be lost that weren't going to be lost. And I said, what are you talking about, Grandma? What are you talking about? And she was just acting all crazy, Well, to me, acting all crazy because, she's dead. She's not supposed to be there. So I'm just like, okay. And she's like, I'm serious. And she like pounded her hand on the table. Boom. You listen to me, child. You do not get in a red truck. Do you understand me? She says, you will die and others will be lost that were not supposed to be lost. And I'm just like, okay, I promise I won't get in a red truck. And I'm thinking, whatever. Well, then all of a sudden, she like turns old. Like her face gets like all these massive, like, I don't know what you would call it, almost cracks in it. And her hair turns white. And her eyes get all sunk in. And she claps her hands. And I'm looking at her. She's all, don't be scared, child. I said, okay, Grandma. And she opens her hands. And suddenly I see like grass. And I see what looks like a grave marker. Not a tombstone, but like the plates on the ground. And you could just see like maybe one or two letters, and it was covered in dirt, mud, and leaves. She says, and you tell my daughter to go have my sister clean off my grave. You understand me, child? I was like, Grandma, and she slaps her hands together. She says, do you understand? I said, yes, Grandma. And her face turned young again, just like in the picture. And she goes, now you listen to me. She says, you're going to wake up. She says, you're going to think this was a dream. This isn't a dream, child. She says, this is for real. She says, you stay away from that red truck. Okay, Grandma. So I wake up the next morning and I'm thinking, wow, I have got to stop eating pizza before bed. You know what I mean? And I just kind of like, I woke up and I was just a little freaked out about it. Not too bad, but I was just kind of like, it's just a weird-ass dream. Well, I go in the kitchen and there's a cup on the table, and it was the same cup I was drinking out of. And my mother got up. She's like, Michelle, stop being a slob. You need to clean up after yourself. And I'm like blaming it on my sister, teenage stuff. I'm like, how do you know she didn't do it? I was like, just knock it off, get out of here. Go, go do what you gotta do, because it was the weekend. And I sat down with her. I said, Mom, I need to talk to you. And I told her about the dream. And she said the same thing. My mom says, Michelle, you need to stop eating pizza before bed. And I'm like, no, Mom, I'm serious. I think this really happened. She's like, it couldn't happen. So she's like, well, I'll call my aunt anyways, and I'll have her, because at the time we lived, a few states away from Illinois, so we couldn't get there to her gravesite. And so she called the aunt, and the aunt said she would go the next day to go check, because it was a few towns over from her. So I leave the house and I go hang out with my friends for a little while, and I had a good friend at the time, and I told her about the dream, and she's like, that's kind of strange. She is, well, if you see a red truck, she's like, don't get in it. Seems pretty simple to me. I'm like, yeah, I guess. So it's like, we just go on with our day. So a week goes by, nothing. 2 weeks go by, nothing. And again, I see my grandmother in a dream. And I'm at the table. She comes out of the living room, and she's like, remember what I told you? And I was like, yes, Grandma, I know. She goes, it's going to happen. She says, you need to not get in that truck. I was like, I know, Grandma, you told me. She's like, listen to me, child. Do not get in that truck. Okay, Grandma. And she said, and my daughter still hasn't cleaned off my grave, and she just turns around and walks away, and I went to go follow her. She was gone. So, okay. So I wake up the next day, and I'm just like, whatever. Yeah, I didn't even know what to think. You're a kid. What do you think? A teenager, you don't know what's going on. You're thinking like some crazy stuff. You're thinking, what kind of haunted thing did I bring home from wherever? Anyways, I go to work that night, and I'm getting ready to close, and this red truck pulls up. And there's a few of my friends in it, not close friends, but people that I just kind of know that, we hang out at parties, stuff like that. They're like, hey, we're going to Santa Rosa, because I lived in California at the time, and you had to go over a mountain to get to Santa Rosa, where we were at. And I said, nah, I'm closing up. They're like, oh, come on. When you get done, we'll wait for you, all this stuff, and I'm like, guys, no, and I'm remembering what she said about this red truck. Nothing, So I'm like, look, man, I really don't want to go. I'm tired. I, made up every excuse in the world. Well, I ended up closing, and when I get out of the restaurant, at the time I didn't have a car. I was walking home. They pulled up beside me. They're like, hey, come on. We had to hold up. Come on, let's go. We got room for one more. You can get in the back, blah, blah, blah. And I told them no. And I told them why. I actually told them why. I said, look, my grandmother said something's getting their grandmother. I'm like, what? I was like, I'm serious. I had a dream, a vision, I don't know. And they didn't listen. And I said, I'm not getting in this truck. And they're all laughing at me, whatever, And they said they were going to pick up somebody else. So, I was like, all right, I'll see you guys later. Well, the next day, I had gotten up like normal, and one of my friends had come over, and she looked just white as a ghost, just somber. And I said, hey, what's going on? And she's like, there was a bad accident last night. I said, what do you mean a bad accident? And she told me that one of our friends, it was actually his truck, he had inherited that truck from an uncle. And get this, the uncle who had died just 6 days prior, the aunt gave him the truck. So the dream that I had was way before his uncle even died. So this is even weirder. But anyways, it was a truck that his uncle gave to them, and something happened. There was people in the front, and then that was back when people could ride in the back of the truck, And apparently, they don't know if they went off the road to avoid a deer or another car. They don't know. But the truck went down the side of a mountain. And one kid did die, and the rest were injured. The one that died was thrown out of the truck, and he was the one they were actually going to pick up in my place. He was the one they were picking up because I didn't want to go, which I've always felt kind of weird about that. But, yeah, they had gotten in that accident. And then I had talked to my mom about it again, and she was like, well, maybe, if you would have been there, maybe somebody, something else would have happened. And what she said, more people would have been lost. It wouldn't have been just you. And I don't know. It's always messed with me, just to think about that. And then I asked my mom about my grandma's grave, and she said she didn't want to tell me because she didn't want me to think what my mom calls hocus pocus, even though my mom has abilities, which she will never talk about, or had abilities. She told me, she said that she had called her aunt, and her aunt did go over there, and my grandma's grave was covered in mud and dirt and leaves, because apparently they had had a flood in that area. So exactly how I described it is how it was. But she never told me because she didn't want me to worry. But that night, I had a dream again, a vision, whatever you want to talk about it. And she came to me and said that I made the right decision, that who went was supposed to go, and that I wasn't supposed to go, and the other people that were going to go were not supposed to go. So I don't know what she meant by that. But then she told me that she was going to be gone for a while, and that I wouldn't see her anymore. And I haven't. I haven't since. I have not had any visions, nothing, anything. It was just the strangest thing. So I don't know. I really don't. I wish I had an explanation for it, but it was just the craziest thing ever. That your dead grandmother comes to you and warns you about something that actually came true, and it did. And like I said, to this day, I don't know. Some people say that people have abilities. Maybe I pulled the vision of her into my mind to tell me about it. Like, it's your way of telling. I don't know. It was just weird. But yeah, she warned me, and I did not get on that truck. So that's definitely one of the stranger things that has happened to me. But I'm grateful. I wouldn't have the life that I have. So, all right. I'm going to get to another story here in just a few minutes. I'm going to play one song for you guys, and then I'm going to come back and I'll be telling you a story that one of my friends told me about, and I'm going to be telling it, like I said, as she wrote it. So it's going to sound like it's my story, but it's not. It's her story. So, all right, we'll be back in just a few minutes.
Talk about it.
Okay, and welcome back to Ecto. This is Michelle Auger, and we're about to start our second story. The second story comes from my friend Sarah. She actually sent it to me by email, so I'm going to read it exactly the way that she wrote it. And just hopefully, this is a little creepy, so if y'all get creeped out, you might want to turn on some lights or something. So, anyways, okay, here we go. She said it was 2 years ago. She said I was working down in med-surg at the hospital. She said they put me at the pediatric unit, which I had never worked at before. She said I was doing my normal rounds, checking on the patients, doing vital signs, doing, my nightly duties. She said suddenly out of room 5, I hear sobbing. She said I looked at my list and there were no patients on room 5. So she said she went in there and turned on the light and there was nobody there. So she thought, well, she said I must have been hearing something. She said, so I went back to the nurse's desk and I sat there and I was putting in the vital signs in the computer and everything, and I didn't really think much about what I had saw at that time. She said, as the night progressed, everybody, she says, you know how it is when the night shift starts, you get a little tired, because I've worked nights for a long time too, so. She said she went to her break, and as she passed by room 5, she could hear the sobbing again. She said she looked over, and she could have sworn she seen the silhouette of a small child. Said she turned on the light, and there was nobody there. So she thought, I must be seeing things, because I can vouch for her. That does happen sometimes on night shift, but it's not always just seeing things. So she went to break, said that she had came back through, and the light was on in room 5. Somebody had turned on the light, so she turned it back off again. And she said as she's walking down the hall, she said, can you please help me? Or she heard, can you please help me? And it was a child's voice. She turned around. She said there was a small boy in the hallway. So she went up to him and said, honey, where are you, where are your parents, So she said, hold on 1 second, I'll be right back. She said she just went to walk to the desk to put her stuff down, and she turned around and he was gone. So she had told the other nurses that were there that there was a little boy in the hallway. And they all got up and they started checking the rooms and making sure all their patients were there, talking to the parents, asking if they had seen anybody. So, and of course everybody was in place and all the parents were there, everything was good. So of course they started thinking she was a little crazy or making things up. She said, I just felt stupid, she said, because I know what I saw, but he wasn't there and there's nothing that I can do about it. So she said a few more nights go by and nothing. And she said on her last night working on the pediatric unit, she said just crazy stuff started happening all over the unit. The lights were going on and off. The computers were going on and off. There wasn't a storm or anything. She said people were coming out and saying that the TVs were changing on their televisions in the hospital. So they were trying to, fix stuff, do this. She said faucets were going on and off. All these things were happening. And she didn't understand why, what was going on. And she said when her break, hold on, I'm reading this, I'm sorry. Okay, it says, my break time came and I was glad to have it. She said I had stepped outside and I went into my car, she said, because I took my break in my car because I didn't want to be in that crazy place. Said as I'm eating my food, I look up and I see a ball of light in the sky. She said I don't know what it was. She said I didn't know what it was at the time. It just looked like a flame, like a falling star, but it was on fire. And I ran inside and I told them what I had seen, and they all went outside, and of course it was gone. So again, they thought I was making up stories. And she said, and that's when we got the call that most of us had to go down to the emergency room. Said we were being pulled, even though we had many patients there, we were being pulled downstairs. And they left 3 nurses on the pediatric floor. So we didn't know what was going on. Nobody told us. So we go downstairs in the emergency room, and we waited there for what seemed to be like an eternity. And all of a sudden, all these ambulances start coming in. Apparently, an airplane had crashed. Oh my God. Okay, I'm reading this. Even though I've read this again, it still creeps me out. Said there was an airplane crash, and they had several people coming in from this crash. Then she believes that's what she saw, the ball of light. So she said they're bringing them in one by one, and some of them are burnt, some of them are okay with just bumps and bruises. Apparently, this plane had gone down, and it wasn't a big plane, it was a 12-seater. Anyway, she said they just kept bringing them in, and apparently everybody survived except for the pilot, which is amazing to me. And she said suddenly she sees this gurney come in, and she kind of had her back to them because she was taking care of somebody else, and she happened to look over, and all she could see was a child. That's all she could see. And my other nurse came over to me and told me to go over and take care of the child. She says, so I went over there, and it was the little boy that I had seen in the hallway. And he began to sob, saying that he needs his mommy and his daddy. And I looked at him, and I just couldn't believe it. She said, I was shocked. The breath was taken out of me. That this child before me was the child I saw in the hallway. How could this be? So, and pretty soon, the dad had come into the emergency room and asked where his son was, and said that he had been traveling with his grandparents. So they take him to the little boy, and the father kept thanking everybody and all this, and she said, I was so confused. I just didn't understand how I could see this boy when nobody else could, and it's this little boy before me. Well, the kid, I guess, ended up staying in the hospital for a few days because he had to be admitted. So he was up at the pediatric place, and she kept going in, and the parents were in and out of there. And apparently one night the mother had told her a very weird story. That he used to be a twin. That the year prior, they had lost his brother at that very hospital. And it was in room 5. So, it was before she started working there, but she said she broke down in tears and told the woman what she had seen. And she said that she went into room 5 with her, the lady did, and when she went in there, the lights came on and turned off again. And she said since then, nobody's had any problems with, God, it's bringing tears while I was thinking about it, wow. But apparently in room 5, they haven't had any problems now. That this kid was just looking for his parents, and his twin brother, who had gotten hurt in this plane wreck, got put in the hospital, and they were brought to him. So that is just strange. That is so just crazy. Oh my God, Sarah, this is nuts. I mean, I kind of skimmed through it before, but now that I'm really reading it, it's like crazy. So basically, this kid reached out to her as a nurse to try to help him find his parents, and and then his brother ends up in an accident at the hospital, and then brings the parents there so he could find his mom and dad. That is so crazy. Wow. Oh my gosh. So there you go. You just never know the reach of somebody from beyond, what you can, what it is. You just don't know. When somebody dies, people think they know, but do they really know? Do you really know what they're capable of, or what, I mean, here a 5-year-old little boy had the power to reach out to somebody that was going to help his brother, that was going to help him find his parents. So, and then my grandmother to me, how she was able to reach way beyond the grave for years and warn me of something that was about to happen. So, crazy stuff. So, anyways, that's it for tonight, and I will talk to you all next week. I'll have some more stories for you. Tonight, I believe Denise Harris is going to be doing Encounters of the Strange Kind. Later on, Ideas will be doing The Jam. Sunday, I believe, is Decades with Denise. Monday starts sports on KBLP LLC, so that should be fun. Tuesday, I believe, is another DWD. I know for a fact Wednesday is Fear the Walking Dead, so that ought to be good, which, by the way, I'm kind of getting excited over the show again. I love John Dory. Anyway, so everybody visit us at KBLP LLC on Facebook. And also at KBLP LLC 4 on YouTube, and you should be able to get any of our podcasts, and also our Facebook page has other stuff too, so go ahead and go there. We seem to have a lot of Broncos fans going on there. I think it's because Ike's from Denver. But yeah, so everybody please just check us out, and you all have a good evening, stay safe, and just remember the veil between the here and there is very thin, so have a good night.